So, hello everyone. This is a follow-up to the promise I made for Wednesday. I'm going to do it today because obviously the chatter that was in the air yesterday about a bunch of spaces being liberated. Rustroika today posted the receipts, and it's useless now to make you wait for it. And I already posted one of the maps that I was thinking about, given the information we had prior to the video of Rustroika. And well, it's pretty simple. First of all, I'm sorry, it's gonna sound extremely weird, extremely creepy, but well, that was it. That was basically most of the space. Of course, we're joking. Of course, it's extremely funny, but based on the locations, based on the places where the Russians are, based on everything, we can keep that laughter as much as possible, because in the time frame I discussed, the very first day of this shit show, in the time frame that the group more or less agreed, we are seeing it happening. Maybe Putin didn't really say that I want these motherfuckers out of my place for the 1st of October, but it really looks like the biggest part of the job is going to be done in 2 months. The way that Ukrainians just got rolled, based on, of course, once again, the Russian locations and the video posted by Rustroika, and also a lot of geolocations that are being given by both sides, well, it's pretty simple. The analysis that Team War Criminal did the very fucking first day, I'm going to repeat it. It's not about bragging, because without the guys, this wouldn't be anything. We just sat our asses, looked around and said, listen guys, there is a problem here. These guys are fucking conning us. And it's a con. The whole game that Zelensky tried to play in Kursk was doomed from the beginning. We said so. We said that doing it was losing. It's a bit like, the motto, a winner wins a war and goes to war, while a loser fights a war trying not to lose it. So this is the problem that we have right now with the whole logic behind the Kursk. But this space would be mostly a tactical and progressive space, rather than the bullshit blubber that I had yesterday, which is still valuable. It's not that. It's just there is no much substance. It's our thoughts, and if you don't agree with that, well, you don't agree. You don't need to agree with that to analyze a movement, to analyze the locations that are taken. But in this case, I want once again to reply, it has nothing to do. We're not fucking geniuses. We're not fucking big brains or whatever. At least I don't see myself like that. It's just looking at what you have in front of you, looking at what is on the fucking map, looking at how many losses the other side is taking, how it's advancing. It's a simple question of math and logistics and topography. Sometimes you need a bit of patience, you need a bit of experience for that, but most of the times you're gonna see, if you have followed this war, you could have started from zero on day one, and today you could read a lot of shit right away and say, this is shit, this is not going to work. We said so, and this little bit of a patting in the back is going to cease right now, but just remember, the very first day, Team War Criminal made the motherfucking Ukro-Zhiders, and that's what happened. So far, so good. Hopefully within 2 months everything is done and we can go back to bashing them about Donetsk, about Luhansk and everything. but it should also be a very valuable lesson to anyone. And that's something that G says all the time: professionals are predictable, but you should fear the amateurs, for they can do absolutely shit things that can turn them in a worse scenario. So let's go and dig into the reality. As you may have already seen, Rustroika posted a video with a bunch of locations where Russian Marines had set foot, so basically had expelled the Ukrainians from, and the bunch of location is absolutely mind-blowing because it's the centerpiece of the Ukrainian territory around the Suja plain. I still need to check more or less how much square kilometers were lost, probably something around 180 to 50, based on the locations, which would be an absolute shit show. And honestly, it's literally the lid on the boiler for the troops that allegedly are supposed to be on the Oglovka area. And well, it also advances the logic that the Russians are trying absolutely to cut the highway that links Yunakivka towards Suja. And Sverdlikovo is exactly that. Once that highway is cut, the Ukrainians will have to fight a liberating battle to regain control of that, while the guys that are behind that line are going to get crushed by the north, by the Russians coming in. Once again, I'm going to repeat, all this is based on that video. We are probably going to see a lot more today and tomorrow. But the most important part, once again, is that the gambit from the Ukrainian side was lost when they didn't went through Korenovo. And I think the Russians understood. I think by the moment some VKS cadets bunched up together to form a motorized regiment or whatever, once again, fuck Fighter Boomer for what he said, because those little guys literally saved the show on day one and day two. And honestly, it's pretty sad because a lot of those guys also were killed by the HIMARS strike in Oktyabrsky. But once again, let's repeat it. It doesn't matter what you thought about these people. Bodies, trenches, fire lines. That's what is going to always trump your smartness, your C2, your Western ISR. Doesn't matter. You need to still walk over bodies. And that's exactly what Ukrainians failed to do, in great part, as I said, because it was a bunch of different micro units gobbled together to try and force a fighting group, a Kampfgruppe. And this is the whole point. And I'm going to go back to what we said the very first day. This was a fucking Nazi LARP, taking the worst of that LARP and try to make something out of it. All these people might have well been the creme de la creme of the motherfucking Ukrainian army, but the biggest problem, once again, seems to have been to small units, non-protected units, unequal units in quality, bunched up together, asked to do multiple tasks at the same time in order to evidently so panic and make the Russians run away, lose their footing. The problem, once again, is that, and I jokingly made this post today, all that motherfucking NATO ISR and all that modernized C2 within the Ukrainian army, and they motherfucking couldn't read a topographic map that would be your eliminating task if you were to go back 40 years and try to qualify for a job as a commissioned officer in any motherfucking war pact military academy. And I say this because they underestimated the problem in Korenovo, they underestimated the problem of taking out the bridges and exploiting right away, and they of course underestimated the answer they would get from the Russians. So in the whole logic here, we can understand two things first. Ukrainians, through all their motherfucking bragging and all their technology and all their NATO aids, are still basically a Crystal Joe and a Crystal Dick. They break almost immediately when they're led to do their own shit. On top of it, unlike what happened with the counter last year, when I think they were a lot better prepared and they targeted the Russians a lot harder, and I want to point out that within those 4 months or something, Russians lost over 120 artillery pieces. When you compare it to what's going on now, we are nowhere near. And the funniest part, of course, is that the Ukrainians do not seem to have or at least to have maintained a culture of understanding the target. It seems to me that a lot of new promoted commanding officers on the Ukrainian side may well understand how to fight the Russians as they are, but not the motives behind the Russian movements. This is extremely bad, or I might also completely bullshit you guys, but the whole logic I've had until now, especially this year, let's forget about 2022, 2023. 2022 was the shit show where the Russians had a huge hubris issue. They got fucked. They paid for it. It's gone. It will never be gone enough. Probably we're gonna have movies from Hollywood on how Ukraine resisted on that shit. I don't give a fuck because for me myself it was already a bad option. But start of 2023, you would think that Ukrainian prowess that happened both in Kherson and in Kharkov would trickle down to the new formed officer corps. We do not see anything out of it, and it has nothing to do with Sirsky. Sirsky was appointed way after Zaluzhny fucked the Ukrainian army in the ass, both by his request for equipment in 2022 for the counter in 2023, but also the logic of promotion within Ukrainian armed forces seemed to be extremely bad. Because there are groups that indeed are pretty good at what they're doing, but it's mostly micro skirmishing. Look at what Azov and K2 and all these motherfuckers are showing. They are showing hyper-fixated points that maybe liberate after a month or two, 4 to 5 square kilometers in areas where they start to fucking screen and dominate the position they want to take. If you want to joke about the attrition level that the Russians are doing, look no further than these fucking poster child units that the Ukrainians are trying to sell. It's baffling that bad it is. They are doing some micro motherfucking skirmishing and trying to elevate that into a level that would seem that they just fucking had a real Bagration op. That's exactly what Korn tried to sell with their push in Medvedev and also in Veseloe. And now we have the images of that push, where they had lost a Brem, one Rosomak, another striker, couple of MRAPs, at least 2 tanks. I mean, it's a shit show. The whole point of the Ukrainian way of war right now is to brag a lot, show a lot of shit, and forget that in fact you're getting your shit handed to you. That's what I'm seeing. And on the other side, you got the Russians that get shown as incompetent, getting destroyed, and then you blink, you miss it, and 2 months later, suddenly you're crying that a failed rotation of Ceretino just fucked up 500 square kilometers in August, and you're like, oh my god, how did this happen? Well, it happened because that's the fucking different situation between one side and the other. On one side, you got the Russians with a plan which is extremely rigid, and the losses are biting. Let's not fucking mistake this. But they know what they're doing most of the time. I mean, nobody knows what they're doing. They're sending like 10 guys to get FPV'd. That's not the point. The point is that attack fails, but another works, and this logic of micro attacks, which starts creating gaps when the biggest forces then can go through. So the attrition strategy that the Russians are employing has a method to the madness, and this method creates the conditions for what we're seeing right now, which is a panic front-wide on the Ukrainian side. Whereas the Kursk operation, let's get back to that, was touted by almost everybody to show that, wow, see, have faith in Ukraine because they can still do it. They can have this maneuver warfare bullshit, and they can lead to victory, gain 1,000-something square kilometers. And like, Wait a fucking minute. What is this? It is that all the nonsense, all the begging from the Ukrainian side when it came to the Kursk operation was exactly that. They wanted to show that they were winning so hard and that they needed support in order to keep those gains. But the reality was a lot worse, and we spoke about it from day one. They didn't seem to have enough troops. They didn't seem to have the equipment standardized enough to have replacement stat, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a CV-90 trying to go through the border with a Leopard 1 or a Leopard 2. We are seeing challengers that came in, probably 3 were used, all 3 were destroyed or damaged. We had Mardes. Mardes had made a wonderful show initially, but now they disappeared. Where are they? And what Ukraine is left right now is literally fighting with maps like Cossacks or Russian senators and bringing up trash wheel carts like Striker or Rosomak. You will not go far with that shit. Especially now that the fucking Russians are angry. And if you want to understand how angry the Russians are, well, look no further than the picture that we saw from the Novogrodivka axis with that motherfucker getting slain, Conan the Barbarian style. And this thing is just gonna get worse, guys. And there is nothing more visually appeasing for guys from the group to see that the Russians followed the exact plan that Ukrainians wanted to actually employ, which is going as fast as possible to Korenovo, getting to Rilsk, then doing an attack from Rushkiv, joining up in Rilsk, advancing towards Kurchatov from the highway, and then, as I said, you have these 3,000 to 4,000 square kilometers, and you force the Russians to pull up maybe half of the force they have in Pokrovsk in order to stop you, because you're risking Kursk, you're risking Kurchatov, and you're risking a further penetration in the Russian rear. And of course, the biggest problem, as I said, is that once this happens, you risk also losing your civilians, because that's the problem right now. We are entering the place where the Ukrainians are so strong, which is PR. And we have all these bullshit videos now that, oh, the Russians in Suja are thanking the Ukrainians, Ukrainians are greeted as liberators, all this shit. But to the T itself, to how the maneuver happened initially from the Ukrainian side, the counter maneuver happened from the Russian side, it's pretty simple. The Ukrainians didn't have enough forces. 2 highways were completely open. They were treated properly by the Russians, and in a certain sense, as I said to the group, it seems that the lack of Lancet in the last week or so, all the Ukrainians are bragging about shooting them down. We saw 2 shot down in 12 days. I think the biggest problem is they wanted a clear sky, given that now Orions are operating overhead. And that clear sky, you cannot have it if you have the Lancets. You can have it with the Zalas, you can have it with other assets, but most of the time, they want a clear sky. They know that the air defense that was tried to be brought up forward was lost. There is one very specific case of the Ukrainian alleged M270 that got blown up. I personally have another logic that seems to have been a air defense system, probably either Tunguska or Buk, because the Orions were flying unimpeded. When you start looking at the geolocations where the Orions started to strike, you see that they cleared up the axis around Suja. Then they attacked around Lubomivka with the 2 tanks going up. Then they blow up another pair of 2 tanks in northern Suja that would probably have been used to defend the axis of approach. And suddenly, you have a push from the Russians from the 10th to the 11th of September, which initially was mocked by the Ukrainians, and then you have Russians everywhere. Obukovka is done, Snagost is done, Krasnoyarsk is done, Uspinovka is done. Now we see Sverdlikovo is done. The whole highway axis towards Suja from Korenovo is being cleared up. And this can only be for two reasons. First of all, the Terrorbob troops, so basically territorial defense troops that were pushed in there. One of them is from Lviv as well, and that's what I said. And I'm going to post that remark. Putting Terrorbobs from Lviv to fight in Kursk is asking those guys to get hanged on the street like cats. It's, I think, the most mentally distressful sign that whoever is leading the Ukrainian armed forces, they are not looking for peace. They are not looking for a solution to their problems. They are looking to taunt, ridicule, and humiliate the Russians and make them do things that the Russians for the moment do not want to do. Russians do not want to absolutely decimate or genocide the Ukrainians. It will come to that, given how the Ukrainians are playing with fire each and every time. Playing that, that asshole kid that knows that there is a level of limit that you have to have as an adult, and he pushes your buttons, but at some point you're gonna flip and absolutely smack his ass and plaster him on the wall. This is why you see guys getting slain, Dracula style at the border, or people getting slain Conan the Barbarian style in Novorodivka. The Russians have had enough, and they really think that their leadership is not doing what they need to do. And there is why you had so many episodes, public episodes of prisoners of war getting simply field processed, war justice, whatever. But let's come back to Kursk, the Kursk area. So literally, there were three phases. First phase is surprise, and a very good, actually, first round for the Ukrainians, where they advanced probably way further than what I expected initially. And I'm not afraid to say that maybe I was mistaken. They were way further than what I hoped they would be. And they were at least 27 kilometers from. So that first phase lasted probably 3 to 5 days, I think, or rather 3. And by Friday already, they had a huge problem. And I'm sorry, I was actually checking them up so I don't see bullshit. So that was the first one. They had advanced far enough in some axes, but they were isolated, so they were starting to get picked off. They established a huge presence around the Suja plain, as we said, and then they started to advance towards Korenovo. That was already the first day. That failed. Then they tried another time to bypass Korenovo and just cut them and isolate them and then advance. That also failed. We saw that the first attacks from Bob were in the area just next Korenovo. I think that Nikipelovka indeed was Nikipelovka. Then there was a second push towards Vetreno in order to get through the highway. We remember the VAB and the Tunguska that were stuck since the first or second day next to Alexandrovka in order to control the highway, as I said, that would come from Lgov towards Korenovo. That also failed. They got spotted, got hit, and now yesterday or 2 days before they finally managed to get their hands on that Tunguska, probably the people of the VAB. But generally speaking, as I said, the plan from the Ukrainian side was not illogical. It was just very badly executed. And then while I had failed the first phase, which was maximum expansion, then I started to the exploitation phase from week 2 to week 4. And that was the phase when I started to drop bombs around the Grushkovo Rayon and try to enter Titkino. The panic attack from the Course on the Russian side didn't facilitate the things. As I said, I posted that even Drapidora at some point understood that they were going too far and all the bullshit that we're saying were out of line. Yet most of them kept this motherfucking bullshit. Pidoliak said the same thing. Drapidora kept saying bullshit. Let's remember that Pidoliak even 3 days ago said that Vesela was lost. And we see that actually it's not the case. Romanov, I will not fucking talk to him because basically him and Tuapidora is basically the same bullshit. Then we had other people saying that suddenly there was a boiler between the same and the defensive lines around Glushkovo and Zvanoe. All this nonsense never materialized, and there was a big reason for that. The reason was that the Ukrainians themselves didn't have the troops. We already spoke about this, and the losses were starting to count. But this is not very important. We don't really care about the losses, and we don't really care about what the Ukrainians thought or what they sold. The PR is their game, so there is not much to say there. What was important, though, is that every single step of the alleged Ukrainian strategy seemed to have failed. So the first expansion was not big enough. That was not safe enough. The exploitation phase actually kept being relentless, contactless fighting. So you had FPVs attacking Buhankas and equipment. You had HIMARS blowing up pontoons and shit like that. But in reality, it didn't allow, and this is one of the things I always told you guys, your biggest issue when you have these large and long strikes is that you do not manage to break through. You do not manage to exploit. So you cut the bridges, you should have pushed right away after it. Why didn't that happen? Was it because the Russians were too prepared in the area? Maybe, maybe not. Was it maybe because you didn't have the forces because they were getting their asses kicked all over the place from Safonovka to Giri? Maybe yes. Probably the truth is in between. Probably the forces that were borrowed from multiple units were still needed elsewhere, and the point was to win on cheap on this side. All these considerations might be thought, but the reality is that at no point, the Ukrainians managed to actually go beyond the exploitation phase. So at some point we had this discussion about the narrative switching, and you saw that from the beginning. It was, oh no, we are bringing the war to the aggressor's soil. We are going to make the Russians feel how it feels, and we did this to pull troops out from Pokrovsk. It didn't happen. Then, we're going to use this as a token for future negotiations. All these narrative switches, all these goalpost shifting that we saw from the Ukrainian leadership were, of course, based on the ground, which is they wouldn't advance. They had issues evading losses. They had issues evading sanitary losses. And generally speaking, it wasn't going well. And, we had half-hearted articles about, maybe it's an issue. Maybe it's going to cost them far more than they can chew. Maybe it was a bad gambit. A lot of people on the Western side were not enthusiastic. Let's not be untruthful. Let's not be like them. They had always this idea in the back of their heads, like, maybe these motherfuckers are going to pay for this, and they fucked up. And one of them, as I said, I posted that piece of article when you see all the Western specialists saying, I think it has failed. And then you had one bitch that will follow the party line and said, but it was good because it showed that the war is not done and the Ukrainians can still fight. And I explained to you yesterday, you don't show that you can beat, Real Madrid by playing with your second local division team and beating them 10-0. You sure you can beat Real Madrid by going and playing the Champions League, but unfortunately you cannot even qualify for that because you don't have any 11 guys to play the game. This is more or less the reality of the Ukrainian troops. That's why, as I told you, that's why they do all this shit about glorifying micro skirmishing, whereas on the other side, the Russians are basically doing these huge rushes, and everybody finds them absolutely retarded. As I told you, I wouldn't do them like that, but there's, for the moment, the only panacea to the contactless fighting that Ukrainians are impacting on the Russians. Now, after the first and second phase was fucked, so first was the expansion, attack, invasion, expansion. Then second phase, which was supposed to be exploiting this expansion, probably way beyond what it was. Then you had the third phase. The third phase was supposedly fortifying the areas in order to keep them. And this third phase was the worst of them. Because for a long while, the Ukrainians, by posting bullshit left and right, they hid the reality from what we're seeing right now. The reality is they didn't have enough troops, they couldn't resupply them properly, they couldn't start to dig in, and they also didn't interdict the roads. One of the things that Ukrainians love doing everywhere in the fucking Donbass, but in Ukraine generally, is they start to interdict the roads. FPVs, distance mining, whatever, it doesn't matter. There is always something. But instead of that, those HIMARS strikes were still trying to inflict damage on pontoons for 3 to 4 weeks, showing the problem that the damage done to the Russian capability of transferring troops through the river, the same, was not definitely hampered. Therefore, pushing the attack as back as possible towards the Glukova area. This actually forced them to amass more troops because, you know, the further time you take, the more chances you give to the other team to strike you. And that problem was exactly shown with the attack that started from Pavlovka, trying to go into two axes. One was the Veseloe and the other was supposed to be bypassing Volfino. And then, of course, we had the Sergeyevka attempted attack, which led to the push towards Medveje, push that now we know was well received by the brand new FPVs of the Russian Federation. And we have this logic that instead of being some kind of Bagration operation to cut the Russians on their backs, it seemed a lot more that they tried to intervene in order to stop the Russians from completely cutting the area in two. So basically from going from Korenovo to Uspenovka, therefore literally having these two areas of control where the Ukrainians were supposed to fight, instead of having a unified access from the border. Once that is done, then the Russians can start pushing towards Veseloe and Medveje and finish off to the Sucha salient. Once that salient is expanded, so the Sucha beachhead on the Ukrainian side starts shrinking, then the Russians can literally choose which axis they want to reduce first. And therefore, we see what we saw recently. I'm going to repost again the advance. So I just posted the map. You can see that there were two advances from Korenovo straight from the highway. That was phase one. They allowed the area towards Snagost, Apasanovka, Obukovka, and down to Uspenovka to be cleared out. And once that completely was cleared out, they started the phase two, which, in my opinion, was directly subsequent to the reach of Snagost and the advance to Lyubovka. And that was going in the back of Olgovka through the highways to Suja, and then starting to attack the area of, as we said, Strelitkovo, Voyanovka, and the small town hamlets, whatever you want to call them, across the highway coming from Korenovo. Now that we know that the highway is cut, it's pretty simple. You don't need to go further than that. Once the highway is cut, if we base ourselves on the deep state map, and this is going to be very funny. I love this moment because deep state, of course, is going to start being a motherfucking bitch. So you can see on deep state currently that Lubomishka is still held, Novoyanovka is still held, and well, the Kremeno is in encirclement. That's pretty funny actually. But if we have to think along the lines of our friends from deep state, you're gonna see if you check the map itself that there is a huge cut from Snagost, which also takes out Darino, takes out Uspenovka and so on, which reduces the salient around Lebedivka and Suja in such a narrow band of roughly 7 to 8 kilometers that I wouldn't want to be there right now. It doesn't matter how much fucking drones you're gonna fucking get there, how much people you wanna funnel there. You have literally a 7-kilometer beachhead with about 3 kilometers on each side of control from Suja. This is a fucking catastrophe for whoever is there, especially given that you don't have air defense, especially seeing that the Orions are flying. So it's a complete catastrophe. Nobody seems to have understood the problem here, and everybody seems to be completely fine with how this shit show is going on, and nobody tries to, on the Ukrainian side at least, to fight it, to counter it. Maybe they already are underway and are countering whatever. But the axis they chose for this quote-unquote Bagration operation has nothing to do with how the Russians are conducting theirs. So we are into a situation where not only, the Ukrainians are losing some of their core assets, but they're losing, and this is where it's bad, they're losing a whole axis of advance. So basically, if they lost Gordievka, Vnespano, Blyakova, and so on, the only fucking way they can cross right now is, of course, Sverdlikova is also lost, as we saw. The only way when they can cross right now is going back to the R200, which is the highway towards Suja. And therefore, the whole shit show now is if they have or not Malaya Lokna. If they don't have Malaya Lokna, I'm gonna tell you guys, because this is how bad the shits are. The shit is actually for the Ukrainians. Let's stay up Zelenshilak. Up. Let's keep Malaya Lokna for them. Kositsa. Let's give them Martinovka as well. So, more or less, this is the axis that currently the Ukrainians have. I'm posting it. It's 57 kilometers of perimeter. This is the real Suja area. And that perimeter, if you divide it properly to make like a square volume, square surface, it's basically 10, 10, 20, 20, so about 200 square kilometers, maybe 250. I just posted that those guys, so you can see it. You have the maneuver asset, and then you have the area that, based on the things that we know on the western axis, have been taken. You can see it's about 57 kilometers perimeter on the Russian border. If you add the rest, it should be around 350, 400 square kilometers that the Ukrainians definitely control or have presence in right now as we speak. The rest is still unknown, but from the western side, it's pretty bad. And as you can see, I let it there. The only way for them to go through, if they want to pass the way they did, as fast as they did, is it's going through the R200, the checkpoint, the KPP, towards Suja. And the difference, so the around Suja itself, the approach to Suja is between 5 and 6 kilometers right now. On the east side and on the northeast side. You are into a complete shit show on the Ukrainian side. You were hoping to have buffer zones of 20, 25 kilometers, and now you're down to maybe 10, but where it matters, actually you're at 6. And that is that. That's game over. Now, if you are the Ukrainian leadership, you understand what's going, and you are asking yourself, do I want a Vovchansk too? With the difference that in this case, I have a smaller city, I have a smaller space to hide myself, and most importantly, I have an ongoing push from the Russians from the back, which is going to probably cut me. If the Russians are nasty, I think they're not going to do it, but the Russians can just fucking cross the border and try and hit the R200 from the heights. I'm going to also show you that via a topographic map, because it's extremely important, it's extremely funny what's going on the Ukrainian side. And this is something that I was preparing for tomorrow, but it was a bit funny, to be honest, because I wasn't expecting this to happen so fast. So basically, this is your R200, and if the Russians are smart, now that they reached the border between they can cross from, sorry guys, so I can show you. So Russians more or less are here, and they can just cross in this axis. I just posted it. I don't think they're going to do it because it's too simple for them to just choke the Ukrainians and avoid their own losses. But this is the problem that Ukraine is going to have. I added the topographic map so you can see. This is the problem the Ukrainians are going to have. They have now Russians on a certain height around Uspenovka, which means that they are going to get absolutely thrashed trying to pass towards Sverikovo. So their only possible chance is either to counterattack on Uspenovka, which would mean getting their shit pushed in again and losing more equipment for something that they should have never lost and let go. They are going to try and concentrate themselves in the R200, H07, or the R200 alone. In any case, Suja remains their only logistical line. Doing that, using just the line towards Suja, so it's already in the first reply to the thread, forces you to try and mount a security perimeter on the border from the Sverikovo area that you just lost. So you're either going to be more visible for the Russians and eat an Iskander or worse, or you are going to go into the counterattack on the Uspenovka area and breach again from Sverikovo inside. In any case, the game is up. You are going, as I said, to make a decision. Either you want a Volchansk 2, Or you were saying, okay, you know what, we fucked up. Now let's save the lives of our soldiers, and let's just go back to what we were doing, which is FPV across the border, pull a shit show, whatever. If you want to still fight for Kursk because you want to keep something for negotiations, now already with the perimeter that you have there is already a shit show. You have a 60-kilometer line of contact around Suja. You are back to the same square as the Russians were 3 to 4 months after they started Kharkov. Are you sure you want to play that game and get buried? I know that Krinky is a precedent, and I know they are retarded enough to do it. And this, I think, in a certain sense, is because they want to absolutely show the world they have this undying bullshit spirit and so on. This is wrong. This is not how you should fight a war. You should fight a war along your means. Of course, you might find or try to find unorthodox manners to have a trump card or a force multiplier. But this is not it. You don't have the fat to burn into this kind of war. And the Russians do. Sometimes they even go way beyond the fat. But the Russians can do that. You can't. It's not how you should do it. But if you want to go pedal to the metal, next year with the mobilization, all that shit, then your problem is that what you're doing now is the worst disservice to whatever effort you want to do next year. Maybe now you're getting clues about how to beat the Russians, and this is how the Ukrainians are going to fucking flip it over once they will get kicked out of Kursk. But the core point here is that it's a two-way street. Ukraine showed a rather bad discipline to breaching the Russian defenses, which were unmanned, by the way. This is the most important part. Unmanned defenses that still incurred at least 7 to 8 vehicle losses. The speed was of essence, of course, the first 3 days, and there the Ukrainians were pretty good. But it doesn't matter if you have those garbage miles, those garbage square kilometers, if your core point, your core objective is a failure. Failing to break through Korenovo was the game. It was up. Of course, the first day you're never going to say, oh wow, I failed this, I'm not going to push it. It's logical. But then you are the fourth week, and instead of going through Korenovo, you're getting pushed away from it. What do you do after the fourth week? Do you say, oh, maybe I should try something else? And I think the attempt to cash in the Glushkovo district area was logical. They needed another Peremoga. They needed to convince everybody they were winning. Of course they were going to try that. The reality, of course, and we're seeing it now, is that I think the moment when Sirsky told Zelia, I need more men and we're going to finish this, I think was already a signal that we're getting our ass kicked here. Bro, either you go all in or you pull us out. And unfortunately for Sirsky, apparently either he's a yes man or he's professional enough not to shy away from the failure and the task he has on him. Is that a positive thing or a negative thing? I will not judge him, because once again, they might well take decisions that for us look stupid, but they have their own constraints. There's a chain of command, there's a planning, there's something that we don't know, as I said, which is most probably try as hard as possible to inflict damage to Russia. And if it turns for the worst, well, then you can start crying to the Americans, which will have to intervene in some form. But the way things are going in Kursk right now, based on, once again, geolocations, images, and so on, shows that I think Siski knew all by week 3 or 4 when he started to recognize that we fucked up. And said, okay, Russians are not coming to Kursk with the forces that we need them to pull from Pokrovsk. And they're not even trying to one-up us. Even now, everybody says that there are roughly 38,000 in Kursk. 38,000 in Kursk. Those people are not being entered in the game yet. What they're doing is, as I said, they're using spirited units from the Marines and from the paratroopers. Those guys are kicking some ass now to open the gates. And then once the Ukrainians are going to be in the situation we're seeing right now, then probably the floodgates are going to push on and they're going to push the Ukrainians completely out. And once that it's going to happen, then we have another problem. What is in the head of the Russian leadership? Are they really going to go after Sumy? I think they shouldn't do it right now. What they should do is make sure that Sumy becomes a ruin, to go at it as Volchansk, because Sumy is not that big. So if you start taking out the core industries of the city, you make it absolutely impossible for them to have a living city. You just fucking turn Sumy into a Volchansk on steroids, and you don't even need to destroy all the city. You just fucking take out, as I said, the industries, power generation, water, treatment plant, start fucking up with their electricity, and then, starting to grid the city and inflict, retaliatory strikes. That's what's gonna be. You dared come to Kursk, now that we're gonna make sure that you never come again. There is no other way to do it. If you start another open Sumy and throw another 30,000 in there, what does it even matter? Kharkov itself didn't pan out properly, probably because they didn't want to have the losses that they avoided by going hard in all the Volchansk area. And at the same time, the fact that Ukrainians took the bait in Kharkov, that opened a lot of space in Pokrovsk, opened a lot of space in Kupiansk, opened a lot of space in New York, Toretsk, and more recently in the Vodiane Ugledar area. Generally speaking, the problem that we are having right now is that I wouldn't go behind I wouldn't go behind the Ukrainians in Sumy. Right now, it doesn't matter. So, can you hear me? Because I think I had another problem with Anyway. Right now, it doesn't matter. Going after Sumy doesn't matter. It's not important. What is important right now is solidifying 2 points. Making sure that the forces that were used for this either get the fuck out, go back to Pokrovsk, because it's still a huge win. Either they stay in areas where you can quote unquote treat them. And that's fine by my standards. If they get to keep 50, 80, 100 square kilometers of Kursk Oblast and get blasted the shit out of there by UMPKs, a little bit like Krinky, it's fine. It is fine. It's going to be a symbolic PR victory for them. But the core problem is that the losses incurred for this month and 10 days far outweigh whatever benefit they had during this month and 10 days. Once again, it's not done yet. We're basing that into the most recent video, and we'll have to wait, as I said, at least 1 or 2 weeks. Next week is going to be extremely important for Ukrainians because I think it's going to be decision time. One, we're going to be closer to the whole US election, but that's not important, really. But most importantly, a lot of announcements are going to be done given that the PDA expires by the 30th of September. So basically announcements for aid, for equipment and so on are going to come now. If we have, as I said yesterday, these announcements for heavy equipment, tanks, Bradleys, all this shit, then probably the Ukrainians are going to sacrifice a lot more people for that Kursk spec. If it's not that, it's, I don't know, planes or shit like that, then indeed Kursk is going to be gradually abandoned and they're going to get kicked out. Let's not joke ourselves. But that's how it's going to go. It's not going to be the trump card that Zelensky hoped it would be, but it's going to be a lot worse than he would ever imagined getting the fuck out of Kursk, based on what we're seeing right now. It's an extremely dangerous game that they played. They are losing it, and in my opinion, if they go down fast enough, there still is going to be some benefit from the Ukrainians, for the Ukrainians out of this shit show, which would be probably the green light from the Americans to strike areas around Kursk with ATACMS, with storm shadows, all that shit. I think that's the main takeaway of this, is that you're gonna still have this Parthian arrow being given to the Ukrainians, despite the fact they're gonna get flushed out of the Kursk Oblast. Now, as for the finishing touches, well, I told you, I hope that the next movement from the Russian side is pushing from the east, a push from the east, especially if we check the map from Deep Cope, or Cope State, whatever you want to call it, would be great. Pushing to Martinovka along the highway, and then getting to the first marshes of the river Suja, that of course is next to the town itself, and then just like start grinding the city. But going from Zamost, Makhnovka, and then entering from the rear of the city, basically enveloping the guys in Suja, and hopefully, if the Ukrainians are stupid enough not to pull out on time, having a mini Mariupol, but this time on Russian territory, that would be the greatest of the options. But I do not think it's going to happen. I think that Ukrainians will do this one within 2 weeks. If things get out of hand for them and they don't get the green light to strike the Russians with ATACMS, all this bullshit, they will pull out themselves. In which form, how, all this shit, I said it could be a catastrophe for them. They're going to try and pull out en masse, and the Russians will be waiting there with Orions, with HIMARS, with Iskander, with whatever. But the most important part here is to understand why it's very, 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 very aggressive from the Russian side to have done what they did the 10th and 11th. And it's pretty simple, as I said, because they understood after a bit of wariness, and they have a lot better information than most of the idiots that call themselves voyenkors. They knew where the Ukrainians were, they knew how many forces they had, more or less, and they knew how they were trying to go forward with that. Were they caught flat-footed? I said it. Probably yes, they tried to ignore that based on the assumption that the Ukrainians would not be that stupid and would not attack that way. And this, of course, is an absolute madness. The Ukrainians for sure were going to make that mistake, given how the whole war has been for them. This whole war has been a fucking chip on their shoulders to prove that they are better than the Russians. But at every turn, whatever, flash of brilliance they've shown, they have muddied and completely sunk it and swamped it with large swath of complete and utter ignorance and self-harm. And as I said, it starts from the beginning with this alleged peace offering by Putin, which would have been now, in retrospective, an absolute loss for the Russians. You know, you start a war, then you basically give the Ukrainians what they couldn't have through Minsk. So this is one of the things I keep saying. The Ukrainians strategically fucking hanged themselves in March 2022. They chose war. They thought they were going to win the war. Which, once again, I think Zelensky at that point was drunk or under influence or showed his lack of experience and especially military experience. For the rest, yeah, like, who the fuck cares? These people were going to die anyway. They were going to lose this war. But the way it's been done, the way they sacrificed themselves for a cause that, unfortunately, let's be honest, was already lost the moment Russia partially mobilized, feels like a bit the whole counter that we've seen, the whole Kursk op, it's like trying to show that you can do something, but you really cannot do it. It's a bit like, I'm sorry to say it like this, a Paralympian running against valid people and then, you know, still losing. A bit like Oscar Pistorius and ending up in Moscow jail, basically. It's stupid what I'm saying, honestly, because I should formulate that differently, but it's literally showing off that you still got it or that you ever had it, but failing miserably in the long term because it's not a game. That's what I said. In Kursk, you don't have participation medals. You make it or you get wrecked. That's it. And for the moment, Ukrainians had never any chance to make it. But right now, they're showing that not only there is not a chance, not only there is no thought about the whole Kursk thing, but cynically, whatever result they may pull out of it, I do not think it was worth the lives of all those people. We don't care. We are the THD team, so it doesn't really matter. But once you get out of the partisan view, where those 600, 700, 800 Ukrainians that got killed in Kursk, plus the POWs, the wounded, the destruction, was it worth a green light of ATACMS in Russia? It's up to you guys to tell me. I personally don't understand this. I would be the first one to admit that maybe I'm wrong, that it was worth that they indeed have a plan to flatten, 300 crucial industrial plants in Russia with 300 ATACMS, and maybe we're going to be crying about that for having underestimated the Ukrainians. But I just don't see it. I would like to be wrong in a certain sense because it would also show that we're not that smart, generally speaking. But so far, I don't see it. And what the least out of this is the Americans allowing those strikes now that Kursk is shown an absolute shit show. And I said the only thing that might turn the Americans around is that the Russians become very aggressive winners, very bad victors in Kursk. As I said, something happens with Suja. You got, a couple of Ukrainian companies locked there, and they surrender, and they get paraded a bit like how the Ukrainians paraded the conscripts when they captured them initially. And then Ukrainians might start crying so hard that the Americans indeed do something stupid and get out of the line. But so far, the fact that the Americans are not going for it tells me all what I need to know. Like, they are seeing that the Ukrainian leadership also doesn't have control over its own ambitions. But finally end the space. As I said, I'm hoping for a quick finish on the Korenovo axis. So basically, after Novoyanovka, a cut through Kremyano and Pogrebki. Malaya Lokna probably is not completely taken, so it makes it extremely impossible for the Ukrainians to hold the area. And then slowly they go down to the plain and counterattack on the rear of Malaya Lokna, first through Sverdlikovo, and then they push from the sisters Ruskое Поречное, Черкасское Поречное, towards Zaroshenki and Martinovka, and once the Russians are there, well, it's basically game over. The Battle of Suja can start, while at the same time, as I said, I would hope for a push from Ruskaya Konopelka through the middle in Черкасская Konopelka, reaching the Suja River, and then going to the Psel River, establishing a kind of kill zone for the retreating Ukrainians if they ever want to retreat through there. And I think the Psel River would be the defensive line for the Ukrainian side on that area, with the risk of, a counterattack sneaking through Plekovo and going behind them from Guevo. And then, as I said, you might have this scenario of a couple of dozen Ukrainians or even 100 Ukrainians getting left behind, and we have a mini Mariupol. But in Kursk, as I said, with all that it could entail for the well-being of potential prisoners of war, given how some of the Marines have behaved. I said, I hope none gets captured alive. Because there must be a consequence for the audacity. And that consequence is not just making Sumy inhabitable, it has to be also the soldiers who participated into this, who thought that it was a good idea, who thought it was great to attack Russia. There is how you teach people how not to do it. It's like when you hit a dog and learn not to bite or not to steal or to sit. Not pleasant, but they need to learn. In this case, the pig needs to learn. And that's it. That's it, guys. So if you want to add anything else, it's up to you. But we are into this situation where it seems that Ukrainian gambit in Kursk is going to be a thing of the past from early to mid-October, unless they double down on everything and the Americans allow strikes within the area from heavier weapons. But they always strike with ATACMS, with HIMARS, so it doesn't make that much sense in general. Thank you very much, guys. Up to you if you want to intervene. I'm cutting now, and you may ask. If you don't need to intervene, or if you think it's enough, then it's going to be goodbye until the next one. Okay, guys, thank you very much then for being here. I will still make a type thread for the Kursk situation anyway, because I think it's very important to put on paper what was said in multiple threads and multiple spaces. Once again, I think we need to give a lot of praise to the Russian General Command into this, although the praise is for the reaction and the understanding of the Ukrainian intentions, instead of the preparedness of the troops for the invasion itself. There is a bit of disbelief. There is a bit of Stalin moment in '41 with the whole Kursk thing, and I think we can forgive them for not believing the Ukrainians would be that stupid. But at the same time, the preparations were pretty bad, and they left the Ukrainians for about 2 to 3 days to start sapping the positions and enacting the plan for the 6th. And that's, I'm sorry, maybe the local leadership fucked up, maybe the idea was still so crazy that it wouldn't do much. Say, you know what, just hunker there and let it go. You will see, we'll intervene, everything's going to be fine. But generally speaking, everything that for the initial part, the expectative, the Russian general staff fucked up. But for the understanding of where they're going to go and how far, how much, how many troops it would take for the Ukrainians to do anything, and seeing what they could see, of course, with their eyes are, I think the Russian staff understood the type of challenge, and they didn't overestimate it, didn't cut their offensive in Pokrovsk, didn't cut their offensive in South Donetsk. Probably the Kharkov area suffered a bit because we can see that a lot of units were pulled from the Kharkov area. But, as I said, nothing of crucial value was sacrificed in terms of manpower and areas so far. So I guess we need to admit that sometimes guerrilla does the things the way they should be done. And of course we have some bright spots in there. I mean, Inokhodets is back. Lancet is proven to be a game changer. Once again, Iskander strikes are everywhere. Life feels good to be a Ziga right now, despite the initial shock. Yep. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, guys.